So, as I mentioned earlier, we're joined by Connor Southwell of the Pink 'Un on Norwich City. Great to have you on, Connor, for your insights. So I really appreciate it. Must have been such a relief to do that post-match video talking about a win, because you must have almost had trouble remembering what a win is and what it feels like.
Yeah, I think everyone at Carrow Road was probably a bit giddy at the final whistle, to be honest. And I'm sure if you've seen any footage of what it was like post-match, I mean, it was like celebrating a promotion. And I can understand looking outside in, it might have felt a little bit over the top, but to have had endured the dross that Norwich City fans have, it was a huge amount of relief. And
I said this to Ollie about earlier, like, please, the celebration police, just let people enjoy football and feel what they feel like. It's an emotive sport, isn't it, for crying out loud, you know.
Yeah, and particularly when you consider, I was there a couple of weeks ago after the Leicester game, and there were protests outside, and I watched the squad get kind of frog marched around the pitch by police. I mean, the contrast in emotions, and I'll use a Philippe Clement ism. He's described it as synergy. Was good to see and much needed. So yeah, it was nice to actually walk away from Carrow Road with seeing smiles on faces and seeing people leaving the ground content, because that definitely has not been the case at any stage of the season prior to this weekend.
No, that's really great to hear. And I think obviously it's two relatively positive performances now at home. Obviously should have beat Oxford, as you said before. You then finally get that monkey off your back and get the win. What is it that's changed with Clement? Is it that he's changed a lot on the pitch, or is it just that some of that negativity seems to have drifted away and it's given the team, the players, maybe just a little bit more confidence in terms of the way they were able to attack the game against QPR?
Yeah, I think it's definitely Philippe Clement and what he's done rather than the negativity. I think fans were probably waiting to see some kind of reaction or response. And for me, I distill it down to two things, which is intensity and structure. I think those have been the big two differences. You look at the second goal that Norwich scored, that comes from a really well-structured press where they force an error from QPR first and foremost, and then it's just a clip pass from Kenny McLean that Sam Field, under not really any pressure, clips out for a corner. And then corner comes in, it's an own goal, and they're 2-1 up, and off you go. So probably an element of luck as well that they haven't got. You look at the goal against Oxford on Tuesday, and that was just a ball dropping in the penalty area favourably for them. That hasn't been happening. But yeah, they're pressing better. I think you basically look at all of the statistics on Saturday in terms of pressing and duels and all of those type of basic elements that we would associate with a team towards the bottom. All of those were up pretty dramatically from that Leicester game. So yeah, it probably a little bit of simplification as well in terms of the way that they've approached it. So all of those things, and I think he's been so impressive in terms of his character and his attributes, and he's managed with authority and quite a heavy hand, I would say. You look at the substitution of Matej Jurasek on Tuesday night, 16 minutes, brought him on, wasn't doing what he wanted him to do, took him off again.
Yeah, I like that.
Really big, bold decision that I don't think a lot of coaches would have made in stoppage time when they were winning, by the way. So, and then the way he kind of managed that post game and even pre the game on Saturday, and then to throw him in stoppage time and to see Matej Jurasek seemingly taking on those messages and going and pressing and blocking. So I think he's just got a response out of the team, the fans and everyone. And I don't know what the future holds, but certainly for this week, I think it's hard to argue that he's put a foot wrong so far.
I completely agree, Connor, because I think I don't know. I'm sure, obviously, it's always slightly tactical with managers because they've got to get those selection decisions right and in-game management. But I think the majority of the gig as Norwich City manager right now is people management. It's motivating, it's man management, it's restoring some kind of group harmony and giving the fan base an intensity and a work ethic and a way of doing things that the Yellow Army can really buy into. And it feels like he's setting those standards right from the off, which a long way to go, but that at least is something that gives me something to cling on to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you another example. I asked him in his pre-match press conference on Friday about Jovan Makama, who's been one of the better Norwich City players this season in terms of what he's offered. They signed him from Lincoln, probably didn't expect to be as involved as he has, but really, I mean, he looks like he's been grown and manufactured in a lab, but he's played on the right-hand side and so physical, so powerful. I think he'll probably go on to be a number 9, but I asked him about it in terms of, now, how impressed have you been coming in and having a guy like this? Obviously missed Saturday through illness, but he said, yeah, he's done well, but I still think he's at 30% of where he needs to be. And it just feels like all he's done is push that floor up and raise those standards. And that, I think, is what was desperately needed. I mean, you go back to Saturday, Pelle Madsen produced a performance we just haven't seen from him in terms of quality. Kellen Fisher looked more like the Kellen Fisher that we saw last season. And again, I mentioned just the overall structure. They just looked like they had more cohesion and more intent about them. So, yeah, I mean, it's been really hard because the training sessions have been limited because of the schedule. He came in at the end of the international break. I think he'd have had probably 3 sessions maximum with most of that squad. It would have been 1 minimum with a lot of the guys who were on international duty. Then you're thrust into a 3-game week, having played, and I know Gav knows how potent Birmingham are at St Andrews, but I think that's really difficult to judge him on that game. The 2 this week have been significant improvements with very limited training time. So I think it is exactly what you say there, Gab. It's been about the mental elements and the man management elements that he's got right. And I think probably a bit of tough love and authority as well he's walked in with. And he's a really, I mean, you notice when Philippe Clement walks into a room because he's a big guy, but he's got a presence about him. And that's something probably that the last few Norwich City head coaches just haven't had.
Yeah, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how he develops that. It's interesting for me to hear you talking about that press and obviously a little bit more in terms of the intensity that seems to have gone up there. I was looking at some stats. You'll know more than I do about whether or not these stats are right. You know, just what you see online. But I think I was reading that obviously Norwich tend to start games actually quite well. I think the stats I was looking at had you 6th for the sort of first half league so far this season. And obviously that then very quickly falls off a cliff when you're going through those second halves, where down to the point where I think you're the worst team in the division at the minute in the second half. Do you think that is that intensity that Clement's trying to bring? Do you think the players are fit enough for that? Is that what was affecting them through those second halves? Is that the reason the season started to pull away? And do you think there's a risk that he could be asking too much if that intensity is lifted and it does start to impact on fitness more broadly?
Yeah, I think that's a risk, isn't it? And a risk about pressing teams generally, particularly in the Championship. You can get to the new year and you can see a burnout pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, he's been pretty open. He doesn't feel fitness-wise they are where they need to be. I know every new head coach stroke manager says that it's an easy win and an easy buy-in, but I think it's probably some truth in that. I mean, I spoke to sporting director Ben Napper a couple of weeks ago. He said the same. They've had too many injuries. They've had so many muscular injuries now as well. Jack Stacey, the latest with a hamstring issue. I think they're up to sort of double figures in terms of the muscular injuries that they've had and the bodies that they've been without. So I think part of the reason Norwich targeted him was because of his track record and the data around player availability under him and some of the conditioning and physicality work and player availability percentage that he's overseen throughout his career. So I think that was genuinely a reason. I mean, you mentioned those stats there, and it is horrendous. I mean, first half, as you say, they've been generally fine and competitive, and actually it's been between the 45th and 60th minute. I think they've conceded the most goals in the league. And that's been a real problem. And actually, you saw it on Saturday to an extent. It was a very, very intense, good first half. And the second half came probably more tactically. But I think that the reasons you mentioned are probably a reason for that, Ollie, because I think their fitness levels haven't been good enough to sustain those performances. So from about 60 minutes, they and this was tactical rather than enforced, which it has been in weeks gone by. They dropped back, they managed the game, they tried to play in transitions, and it just felt probably a bit more intelligent in terms of the way that they utilise that, because they're clearly not at a fitness level where he wants them to be. And for me, the big question mark is how do you achieve that mid-season? I mean, he's got a full week on the training ground this week, and then we're into a 3-game week, and then it's the Christmas schedule. It's a tough thing to enforce, and that's going to be the challenge, I think, going through what is a very, very hectic month of Championship football.
One thing I wanted to flag, just inspired by that, Connor, with you, Ollie, is I suppose it's interesting. We spoke to a Swansea fan about Vitor Matos trying to implement that extremely aggressive style of play straight away and the sort of pluses and minuses of that. Should we be giving Philippe Clement some credit for actually being realistic about where the fitness levels are at and actually saying, okay, we're going to be aggressive for this period, but then actually we're going to be compact and keep a reasonable line of engagement and defensive line, and we're not going to pitch ourselves too high?
Yeah, absolutely. It's intelligent management, isn't it? You manage the squad you've got, not the squad that you wish you had. You know, we all wish we were watching Manchester City and therefore we could play however we wanted to. But that's not the way it is. And a good manager can come in and work with the tools in front of him. And it sounds as though, particularly on Saturday, getting those 3 points, so much of that comes around to the recognition of we can do this for 45 minutes. And the second half, we need to be intelligent. We need to play sensibly. We need to have a sort of more structured style in terms of how we're still going to carry the threat on the counter. And absolutely, if Clement can get that in place, and if he's managed to get that in place as early as he had, there's a huge amount of credit that should come out of that, because I think it shows the signs of a good manager, hopefully, for Norwich.
Pelle Matson, Connor, we alluded to it earlier, the ground that he covered. Do you think he has the potential to be the glue of Norwich City for the remainder of the season in the centre of the pack?
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of it's been a little bit over the top, I think, because I think it's clear that he's come across from Denmark. They did a lot of work on him, as I think a number of other championship clubs did. He's not a like for Marcelino Nunez, which has been part of the issue, I think, in terms of his early Norwich career. But it was by far and away the best performance. It actually reminded me a lot of a Tom Tribal performance, to be completely honest, in terms of the ground he covered, but also some of the tackles that he produced. They were big tackles in both halves at big moments that either stopped attacks or helped Norwich create them. We just haven't seen that from him so far, because I think the quality on the ball, those almost metronomic qualities, they're not in doubt. We've seen those in sort of kind of talent on an individual basis, and it's probably true of Norwich's recruitment more generally. We've seen a lot of individual stuff that makes you think, okay, I can kind of see why they like him, and maybe the issue has been fitting all of those pieces together into something cohesive and something that functions effectively. And midfield's been a big issue, because a lot of the issue has been that those players in there feel and have looked quite stodgy and quite identical and quite similar. But actually, McLean and Matson on Saturday, there was a really nice blend to them, with Marcondes in front who could provide a little bit more energy and buzz about and whatnot. So yeah, again, I think Clement deserves credit for that as well, because it's just a level of performance we haven't seen from him. But the big challenge now is, can he do it consistently in what is a very tough period of games? Because there's clearly a talent in there, but we know what this league is like when you come from abroad. It takes time, you have to adapt to it, and it can be difficult. And sometimes a performance like that can get you going a little bit, and just add that self-belief that actually he can play at this level and is capable of dealing with the robustness and physicality of it can be key sometimes.
I think you make a great point there, Connor, in terms of recruitment and focusing too much on the individual. And it makes me wonder, is that something you need to look at in terms of the next two transfer windows? Because if I look at great Norwich City teams, the one under Paul Lambert, for instance, first thing people always say is brilliant characters. You could be 3-0 down in the game and people believe that you'd get back into it. And you had Grant Holt there, you had Stephen Whittaker, Russell Martin, big vocal characters that made Alex Tete going a bit further forward, I think. Or actually, no, was he part of the double promotion? He was certainly in the Premier League under Lambert, wasn't he?
Yeah, he came in the Premier League season. Yeah.
Premier League. So it's players like that that can be part of the collective, if you like. I think that's a really important thing from my point of view that Norwich have got to try and recruit for in the next two windows.
Yeah, and I think it's hard, isn't it? Because you bring in so many players from abroad, particularly some that are young, and I think the hit rate, certainly initially, is always going to be lower. And probably what's cost them a little bit this season is they've got far too many in that squad who are either in year one or year two of Championship football, and not enough of those kind of dependable types that you can almost bed them in around that are going to help keep that consistent level of performance. That's something that they've really struggled in, because you're asking not just 1, 2, 3 players to adapt to, not just adapt, probably thrive at the level. You're actually asking 7, 8, 9 and the bulk of your team to do that, and they're all in different places and they all go up and down, and there's peaks and troughs, and we know kind of development in football isn't linear. So it's been difficult, I think, to maintain any kind of level of performance. But I think you can, as I said, I think you can see in individuals that talent is there. Probably what has been lacking for me, and again, whether we will see this in the windows to come, is that they've identified good players on an individual basis. But it's probably that element, like you say, that squad building element of this is a really good player, but how is it a really good player in our team, in the team that we're trying to create? And that's probably the bit that's been lacking. And that's what makes January so interesting for me, because I'm sure Philippe Clement, with the history that he's got, the contact book that he's got, the experience that he's got across a multitude of leagues, is going to have some good ideas of players that he wants to bring in, and they need to get that blend right and make sure it's in a better place than it has been so far this season, where it's probably they've probably lent too far and too aggressively into that strategy of buying probably players for quite a lot of money from overseas that in the here and now probably just aren't quite what they needed to be a consistent Championship team. So yeah, I think like you say, that squad building element is going to be really big, and also not in the players they sign, but also those that they decide to move on as well. And that's almost to me as fascinating as maybe what they do from an inward perspective, I would say.
Absolutely. Do you think Norwich City are going to stay up? Have you got more belief based on the last couple of performances that that you're on the right track?
Yeah, based on the last week, I think if we'd have had this conversation a week ago, I think it probably would have been very, very different. And it's always slightly skewered, isn't it, after you win a game? But I think it's hard not to at least feel a bit more optimistic. Let's be honest, the challenge they've got still is immense because of the position that they're in, and a win at the weekend, and yet they're still 4 points from safety. So it's not insurmountable. They've got to now work on consistency, and Philippe Clement has said this: they're going to lose games, they're going to perform badly in the weeks ahead, but it's about having those fundamentals, I think, and that's where the intensity and those kind of that structure for me is so important, because if they can lean on that in the games ahead, then they hopefully can just keep themselves ticking over and getting points. So yeah, look, I would hope with the length of time that they've got, with the transfer window as well, which isn't always a silver bullet to these things, plus now Philippe Clement in the building with what seems to be a way of working that at least has got an initial reaction. Let's hope in a month's time we're talking about it in the same light. But yeah, it definitely feels like now there's a clearer route to safety than there was if we'd have spoken a week ago. And that positivity and optimism has been in very short supply in Norwich City circles. So it's nice to be stood here stood talking to you guys with a smile on my face about Norwich City, because it's been a very, very, very long time since that happened, and it may not happen again for 3-4 weeks. So we'll revel in it while it does happen.
Absolutely. Connor, thanks so much for talking to us, and keep up the great work on Pinken.
Top man, thank you guys, appreciate it.
Cheers. And everyone go subscribe to pinken.com